If we have a recession, the tools are limited. You're depending on monetary policy, but it can't do that much. And fiscal policy, let's use a more honest phrase, political intervention, because it's very unpredictable. I think there's some countries like Australia where there's a lot of consensus. They can execute a fiscal policy, might not be perfect timing. In my country, it has different meanings to different people. The Republicans would cut taxes, the Democrats would raise the size of government. As soon as they shift power, they'd undo each other. So the idea that fiscal policy can step in. For slow growth, I'm a little more optimistic. I feel innovation will pick up. I feel we're still seeing the long legs of the financial crisis, so I'm a little more optimistic. Where the next decade goes, I mean, I do think innovation and productivity, AI, inventions that have happened over the last 15 or 20 years, but particularly because of the financial crisis, the implementation's been very slow. So it's very hard to predict productivity growth, but in particular, just because it was slow last decade is not a strong prediction that it will be next decade. I don't see an easy solution to this problem, which has to do with technology, globalization, favoring workers who can make use of these things, and workers who can't are losing out. And I think we live in an era where probably government transfers need to be higher in many countries to compensate that. I'm talking particularly about the advanced economies, because I think in a lot of emerging markets, India, China, there's a lot of room for growth still. But in the advanced economies, I don't know. We can talk about education, we can talk about infrastructure. I don't think protectionism is a solution. I don't think unionization is a solution in a globalized world. The reason unions died was because of globalization, technology, competition. So that's a huge challenge. If we don't find a way to face it, the populism will get more extreme, and we're more likely to go into a long-term tailspin, or at least slow growth period. I worry most about China because they're clearly on a slowing trajectory. Long-run growth in China is going to be much lower than it is today. The population's slowing. They have a horrible demography problem. Their catch-up with the West has slowed down. They've overbuilt in housing, which is their stimulus, on and on. And they're very good at dealing with problems. It's much easier to deal with a growing economy than a slowing economy. So, and another area I would highlight of being at risk are emerging markets in general, where there's really been quite an explosion of debt. Admittedly, a lot of it's private debt, but in these many countries where there are monopoly corporations, there aren't many companies, the distinction between government and private and government's not clear. So debt is going like this, growth is going like this, and it's, I think, a fragile situation. India has the potential to grow at 7 and 8% for a long time. China does not. India has a young population. It has a lot of potential to deepen its infrastructure to catch up. China is at the other end of the curve. They're reaching the end of the line. And yes, Fang is very good, but they can't say anything different because that's what the leader says. I think everyone recognizes that the future growth over the next decade in China is probably 3%, 4%, the average over the next decade. Well, because they don't have population growth anymore. Their labor force is shrinking. They're much further along the technological catch-up curve, and they have a overbuilt housing, very centralized government. So I think China probably is not going to be contributing as much. But as India grows, it will contribute more and more. I mean, I think there's plenty of reasons to be optimistic that India can do better than 6%.